Amboseli Reserve, late morning. A thin layer of haze clung low to the grass, stirred only by the quiet scrape of wind across the rim of a shallow clay basin. At the bottom, a calf twisted in the hardening mud. Her legs kicked without rhythm, half submerged, slick with drying sediment. Her flanks were dark with effort, her breathing sharp and uneven. The waterhole had once been wide and deep, fed by the rains months ago. Now it lay shallow and cracked, ringed with collapsed clay walls that held the young elephant like a broken bowl. She was no older than a year. Her ears flared with each failed attempt to rise. Every push ended the same, one leg slipping under, the other pinned. There were streaks along the side of the wall where she'd tried to climb earlier in the morning. Now the ground had dried too fast beneath her, turning slick clay into a crust that cracked with each movement. Her trunk curled briefly toward her chest, then stretched flat into the mud again. No herd sounds nearby, no shadows across the edge, just the faint pat of her breath and the creak of distant wind in the acacia trees. Flies gathered near her eyes, but she didn't blink. Her sides rose too fast for her size. She tried to shift again, this time pushing her front legs up first. Her knee gave. She slid sideways with a dull thud. A thin cry followed, not loud, not sharp, but enough to carry across the short grass. At the edge of the basin, the hoof marks of larger elephants had already dried. They had likely been here at dawn, drinking, moving on. The calf may have slipped in after them, or been left behind. Down in the hollow, time moved slower. The mud clung deeper now, sucking her limbs each time she moved. Her tail had stopped swatting. Her ears drooped at the tips. The sun pressed hard against the clay edges. If she stayed past noon, the walls would grow hotter, firmer, less forgiving. Each hour reduced her chances. If she moved too much, she'd exhaust what little strength remained. If she didn't, the heat would do its own work. In the distance, a pair of oxpeckers lifted from the grass in a short flutter. A lone waterbuck moved off toward the tree line. Still no sign of the herd, no sound of adults. She blinked once, finally. Her trunk curled back toward her chest, limp. For a moment, she didn't move at all. Then her body twitched. A small, involuntary shift. One leg kicked, then stilled. Her mouth opened just slightly, but no sound came. By the time a passing tour guide spotted the movement from a far trail, the basin looked quiet. Just a ring of dried mud, broken only by one small patch of dark movement near the center. He paused, lifted his hand, reached slowly for the radio. The calf didn't hear him. She had stopped struggling. Her head rested sideways now, half pressed into the drying ground. Her side rose and fell, slower than before. She was still alive, but not for long. If she wasn't pulled free within the hour, the sun would finish what the clay had begun. Elias reached the basin less than 40 minutes after the call. The drive had been short, but the terrain slowed him. Shallow dips in the cracked land where brush caught on the tires, and old elephant paths curved too wide for the wheels. He moved quickly but without haste, stepping out into the rising heat with a steady breath and a sack over his shoulder. The driver had already left, unsure what more he could do. The calf was still in the same position, folded deep in the center of the basin, her body slick with dried clay, her legs angled awkwardly beneath her. He didn't speak at first. He walked the rim slowly, boots pressing into the outer crust of the basin wall, each step marking a faint indent. From above, it was clear the walls had hardened too much for any self-rescue. What had once been a soft slope had baked into angles too steep for a young calf's weight. There were old slide marks across one edge, evidence of earlier attempts. But now the surface was too dry. If she kicked upward again, she'd lose more strength. If she stopped entirely, the heat would take over. Either way, the result would be the same. He paused and crouched, watching her ribs. They rose, then fell. Then again, slower. Her ears twitched faintly. Her trunk didn't move. From this distance he could see flies had gathered along the back of her legs. She was dehydrated, likely since morning. If they pulled now, there was still a chance. But if they waited longer, her body might not respond at all. Elias pulled a folded rope from the sack, then unrolled a thin canvas wrap soaked in water. He carried both down a narrow part of the basin, where erosion had created a gentler incline. He walked softly, letting his steps crunch into the clay without sound. The calf didn't react to him. Her eyes were partly closed. Her chest lifted again, then stopped. For a long second, it didn't move at all. He stepped closer and laid the wet canvas near her flank. Careful not to touch her. Moisture lifted slightly from the wrap into the air. He crouched again. His voice, when it came, was low and plain. "It's okay, girl." No change, but her ears fluttered just once, a tremble more than a move. He didn't reach out. He only watched. After another moment, he leaned back and began uncoiling the rope beside him. The plan was simple. Place the loops gently, anchor them to the slope above, and pull without lifting her limbs, only guiding the body, allowing gravity to do most of the work. He had done it before, with zebra foals, with calves older than this one, but never alone, and never with the sun already this high. The canvas began to dry. The rope darkened slightly as it dragged across the wet edge. Time was pressing. Not in panic, but in fact. If they waited, she would lose muscle control. If she collapsed fully, no rope would matter. He rose and scanned the tree line once more. No movement, no shadow, no herd returning. The calf was still alone. The stakes were clear now. If they intervened now, there was a narrow chance. If they delayed, she would not stand again. Elias turned back toward the vehicle and reached for the radio. He would need 2 more hands. No shouting, no noise, just steady lifting and the hope her legs would hold. The clay cracked underfoot as he moved uphill again, quiet but quick. The calf didn't move behind him. Only the shallow sound of her breath followed, quieter than before. By the time the second vehicle reached the basin edge, the calf had not moved in 20 minutes. Her chest rose, but barely. Elias stood with one boot in the slope, pointing toward the softened edge he'd marked earlier. The 2 other rangers, Tomas and Kamari, unloaded gear without speaking. They had done similar rescues before, but never with the clay this firm, never with a calf this young, this still. They moved like they'd rehearsed it. Not fast, not loud, just steady. Tomas took the water sack and stepped down first, keeping to the narrow path Elias had used. Kamari followed with 2 coiled ropes, already knotted with makeshift harness loops. The plan was to place both ropes under the calf's chest and shoulders, avoiding her legs. Anything touching the lower body might cause injury now. Her limbs had stiffened too much from strain and heat. The calf stirred as Tomas approached. Her ears shifted, a faint rustle. Her trunk lifted a few inches, then dropped. No cry came. No warning sound. She had passed the stage of protest. Now, there was only instinct and whatever strength had not yet drained away. Kamari crouched near her side. Elias remained above, holding the end of one rope, ready to anchor it from higher ground. With slow hands, Tomas slid the first loop beneath her front shoulder. The calf tensed. Her legs kicked once, sharp and quick, a short burst of fear, but she could not lift herself. The motion left a new smear in the clay and scattered dust into the air. She groaned softly, a thick, low sound pressed from the belly. Then silence again. Tomas didn't speak. He simply waited. The rope held its place. Kamari moved to the opposite side, adjusting the second loop to mirror the first. The calf twitched but did not resist. Her trunk rolled once against the dirt, then folded beneath her jaw. Her eyes did not close, but they dulled. Still, she remained upright enough to give them hope. If she could lift her chest once they pulled, Her legs might find footing. If not, they would have to support the full weight of her frame, and there would be no second attempt. Elias gave a signal with one raised hand. Kamari placed his palm softly against the calf's neck. The skin was warm, tacky with dried sweat. She didn't flinch. For a moment, all three rangers paused. No sound, no instruction. Just the wind brushing over the top edge of the basin and the quiet breath of something still alive but close to failing. Then Elias began to pull. Not a hard tug, just a firm, lean, steady pressure up the slope. The rope tensed. Thomas braced his shoulder against the calf's flank. Kamari moved the second line gradually, hand over hand. The loops held. The calf slid forward no more than a foot. Her chest lifted, then dropped again. One leg flailed, bent sideways. "Almost there," Kamari said softly. The calf didn't move again for several seconds. Then her ears fluttered once, her trunk coiled back slightly, and her head tilted toward the pull. No sound, no cry. But she didn't fight. The moment was brief. No one exhaled yet. The ropes held firm. The calf, for now, was still. But the sun was rising further. If she didn't rise with their help soon, she wouldn't rise at all. The ropes had steadied. The calf's head no longer dropped to the side, and one front leg now pressed faintly into the slope. The basin's upper rim stayed quiet, but Elias could feel the stillness had changed. When he turned toward the eastern brush, his eyes settled on a shape that hadn't been there earlier. A large female elephant stood just past the first line of acacia. Her body was angled sideways, but her face pointed straight toward them. She didn't move, didn't sway, just stood in the dust, unmoving, trunk hanging low. He raised one arm slowly, not toward her but to Thomas and Kamari below. No sudden gestures, no shouting. The rangers paused mid-pull. The ropes loosened slightly. The female's ears flared once, a wide and measured sweep. Still, she did not step forward. She didn't retreat either. They couldn't tell if she was the mother. No markings, no vocal signs, but she was watching with intent, and that alone made the space around them feel narrower. If she rushed now, they wouldn't have time to climb out. But she didn't rush. She remained at the edge, half shadowed by the trees. Her presence felt more than heard. The calf shifted again. Her trunk moved in a slow arc across the dust, then curled back weakly toward her shoulder. She groaned, not loud, but longer than before, a hollow, chest-deep call. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't distressed, but it reached. A sound that passed over the clay walls and into the open space beyond. The female reacted. Her trunk lifted slightly. One heavy step forward, then stillness again. She didn't respond with a call. She didn't pace. She only stood and watched, trunk now hovering just above the earth. Kamari looked up at Elias without speaking. Elias nodded once. "Keep going." They resumed the pull, tighter this time. The calf slid forward another half-meter. Her rear legs scraped through a patch of dried reeds. Dust scattered. Her eyes opened wider just for a moment. She made another sound. Shorter now. Not quite a cry, but not silence either. The female stepped again, 2 more paces toward the basin rim. She remained uphill, still distant but no longer hidden. Her body looked older, her right tusk worn shorter than the left. Her skin bore dried streaks from earlier wallows, the folds along her legs caked with gray. No aggression came from her, no warning. But her posture said one thing clearly. She had come for this calf. Whether she had birthed her or adopted her didn't matter now. The bond had formed, and she had waited. The calf moved again. This time she tried to stand. Her legs trembled beneath her, then buckled. She fell back into the rope, sides heaving. Tomas steadied the loop, whispering something low. The calf didn't respond, but above, the female let out one long breath. Not a trumpet, not a cry. just a heavy release that rustled the nearby brush. Then she stepped forward, slow and sure, until the dust touched her toes at the basin edge. She didn't descend. She didn't interfere. She only stood there, visible now to all three men. Whatever they did next, they would not be alone. The calf wasn't alone either. The light shifted faintly behind the trees, drawing longer shadows toward the basin floor. The ropes tensed again. The calf's breathing stayed shallow, but a line had been drawn now. Not in fear, but in presence. The kind that does not shout, but waits. The ropes pulled tighter. With each slow shift, the calf's body moved inch by inch toward the ridge, her rear legs dragged behind her, joints stiff, clay flaking off in dry sheets. Her front hooves caught on the slope, slipped, caught again. The basin didn't give easily. The last incline was steep, hardened from days without rain, dusted by wind, slick with the effort of other failed climbs. But the rangers leaned their weight into the cords, bracing with bent knees and heels set in cracks, their grip steady, their breath low. The final heave brought her to the edge. Her ribs rose sharply once, then dropped. Her chin scraped the ground. She was out. Elias held the rope while Kamari slid the loop from under her chest. Tomas let go first and stepped back, giving her space. The calf lay just past the rim, splayed and shaking, her limbs twitching from fatigue or shock. Her eyes remained open but unfocused, clouded with dust and heat. The wind moved around her, lifting dry grass in gentle strokes, but she did not react. Elias crouched beside her slowly. His hands didn't reach for her body. He placed the cloth wrap near her flank again, soaked with what remained in the water sack, a soft spot against her overheated skin. Her ears didn't lift. Her trunk remained slack. There was no cry, no groan, no sound of protest. She had made it out of the hole, but her strength had bled away in the basin. What remained now was uncertain. He leaned in slightly, voice low. "You're almost there." The words did not change her, but her breathing, still shallow, continued. Her chest rose in slow intervals. Her body no longer struggled, but it didn't respond. She wasn't asleep. She wasn't unconscious. But she was far from recovery. The risk had shifted now. The danger wasn't the fall anymore. It was time. If she did not stand soon, circulation could fail. Her legs would not hold weight after long in that position. Muscle collapse was real. And her herd, if they were near, would not wait forever. Behind them, the large female still stood by the acacia. She hadn't moved closer. She didn't call out, but her ears tilted forward, and her weight shifted slightly from one front leg to the other. She watched, steady and deliberate. The calf stirred. Not much, just the flicker of a rear leg, then the smallest roll of her trunk. Elias didn't speak again. Tomas set down the empty water sack and stepped back beside Kamari. No one pushed her. No one touched her skin. The wind brushed across the open ground. A bird called somewhere near the ridge. Then her ears moved. A slow flutter. Not enough to lift, but a change. She tried to shift her weight. Her front leg bent beneath her, then failed. She didn't cry. Her head lowered again. Her mouth parted slightly, and a breath passed out with effort. Still, she had moved, not by force, not by fright, just by what remained in her. Elias did not stand. He stayed at her side, knees in the dust, rope loop trailing behind him. They would wait. Not because they could afford it. They couldn't, but because nothing else would help now. If she rose, it would be on her own timing. The trees held still. The female did not move. The light stretched longer across the clay, and in the dust, the calf's ribs lifted one more time. The dust settled slower now. Light had shifted into a paler shade, the sun dipping just enough to cast the trees in long shadows across the open earth. The calf still lay where they had pulled her, motionless except for the faint rise and fall of her chest. The rope had been loosened but not removed, resting like a quiet thread in the dirt beside her flank. She hadn't tried to stand again. Not yet. The three rangers waited without speaking. No movement, no sound. Kamari stood near the water sack. Tomas crouched with one hand brushing a smooth patch of ground. Elias knelt beside the calf, still and watchful. Their work was done for now. Anything more would be too much. The danger had shifted once again, from heat and entrapment to what could not be helped by hands. Then, without warning, the air thickened. A low breath rolled across the rim of the basin. Not sharp, not loud, just steady and near. The female elephant who had stood at a distance for so long began to move. Her steps were slow, deliberate. Each one pressed softly into the earth, raising only a thin veil of dust. She crossed the distance between the acacia shade and the calf's still body with no sound but the drift of soil underfoot. The rangers did not react. No one backed away. No one reached for rope. It was not their moment now. She stopped just short of the calf's hind legs. Her trunk curled once above the dust, hovering mid-air, then lowered, slow and certain, until it touched the calf's spine. The gesture was light, barely more than a sweep of air, but the calf flinched, a small twitch, shoulder to tail. Her ears lifted a fraction, then stilled again. The matriarch held her position. Her trunk remained along the calf's back, brushing gently forward until it rested along the shoulder blades. She didn't trumpet. She didn't rumble. She only stood, massive and still, her skin darkened by old clay and shade, her breath soft and rhythmic. Then the calf moved. First, her eyes opened wider, not fully but enough to reflect the last edge of light. Her front legs shifted beneath her. Her trunk coiled once, pressing into the dust. Her neck lifted slowly, shakily, as if from a place far beneath the surface. Elias didn't speak. He watched the calf rise, not fully, not all at once, but into something upright. Her head lifted clear of the ground. Her back legs remained folded beneath her, but her front half was leaning into life again. Her ribs moved faster now, breath catching in a tighter rhythm. Her ears wobbled at the tips. The matriarch stepped closer, just one slow pace. Her trunk swept down the calf's side once more. This time, the calf responded, shifting her weight, wobbling forward an inch. Her front foot pressed into the dirt, not steady, but planted. If she stood now, her legs might hold. If she didn't, she'd need to be left behind. There was no in-between. The herd would not return twice, and she could not be carried again. The matriarch didn't nudge. She waited. Beside her, the calf shivered once and blinked. Then she leaned forward again, legs shaking, ears wide and unsteady. The light touched her shoulder as she rose, not fully upright, not strong, but standing. The wind changed slightly, rushing through the grass in long, low streaks. The matriarch turned. The calf followed. A slow, uneven step. Then another. The rangers stayed where they were, quiet and still. Dust trailed behind them as they walked. Not far, just enough. The calf stood, but barely. Her legs trembled beneath her, knees bowed, shoulders low. The dust clung to her sides in thick streaks. And her back legs didn't straighten all the way. But she remained upright, not falling, not folding. Her breathing stayed shallow but steady. Her ears shifted now with more purpose, catching the direction of wind or scent, and her trunk brushed the earth once before curling upward in a slow arc. The matriarch waited just ahead, a few paces up the slope. Her body was turned slightly now, her side exposed to the calf, her head angled forward. She didn't press, didn't beckon. She simply shifted her weight from one foot to the next and held still. For a moment, the calf didn't move. Her body swayed and one rear leg slid a few inches back into the dust. But she recovered, slowly, lifting her chin and stepping forward with one tentative stride. It was unbalanced, almost more fall than walk, but it carried her closer. Another step followed. Then a pause. The matriarch stepped aside, just half a stride, opening the space ahead. The calf limped forward again. Her pace was uneven, a quiet wobble in the fading heat, but her direction was clear. With each step, her posture lifted slightly. Her ribs no longer caved in quite as sharply. Her trunk swayed, low but moving. Dust rose faintly behind her with every shift, light enough to catch in the wind, then disappear. The rangers stayed still. Kamari had lowered the rope coil to the ground. Tomas stood with arms folded, one boot pressed into a ridge of hardened clay. Elias remained crouched, watching the calf move away, his hand resting lightly on his knee. No one reached for water. No one moved to follow. There was nothing more to do. If the calf stopped now, she wouldn't get far. But she wasn't stopping. Not yet. Her body leaned forward, every motion awkward but certain. The matriarch turned fully now, her head aligned with the tree line, and began to walk. Not fast, just a slow, dust-heavy movement toward the bush. Her ears flicked as she moved, brushing the dry air. The calf followed. A limp in the right leg pulled her sideways slightly, but she adjusted. Her steps grew quieter. Her form blended into the taller grass. The sound of her feet, faint at first, began to fade with distance. No vocal call passed between them. No trumpet, no low rumble. Only presence. The closeness of movement. The rhythm of shared steps. A space closed by walking. The light thinned further. The edge of the sun dropped behind the ridge to the west, casting longer shadows over the basin rim. Dust hung in the air like smoke, pale and silent. The ropes lay forgotten near the slope. The canvas wrap had dried stiff. In the distance, the grass swayed where the two had passed, bending slowly back to stillness. The calf paused once before reaching the edge of the trees. She turned her head slightly, not back toward the men, but toward the earth behind her. Then she faced forward again and continued. The matriarch entered the brush first. The calf followed, a few steps behind. The sound of their movement thinned until only grass and wind remained. And then, nothing. Just the hush of dust across the rocks and the faint hum of insects in the dying light. The sun had dipped low by the time Elias returned alone. The brush no longer swayed with recent movement. The wind had softened, more a hush than a breeze, and the air held the faint warmth of a day that had nearly closed. The others had taken the vehicle back toward the outpost, rope ends coiled, gear stored, quiet between them. No need for debrief. The work had spoken for itself. Nothing had gone wrong. Nothing had gone especially right. But something had been carried out with care. Elias walked with no urgency. The ground was dry underfoot, but the ridgeline still bore the indentations of passage. Wide tracks from the matriarch, lighter ones behind her. The marks weren't deep, but they were fresh, clear in the afternoon slant of light. Dust filled in the edges of each print. A drag line curved between them where the calf had limped, slower, closer to the earth. The space between the tracks said everything. The larger prints led, unwavering. The smaller followed just behind. He stopped at the rim of the basin. The place looked quiet now. No shape at the center, no scattered gear, no circling birds above. The ropes had been pulled aside. The canvas wrap lay off to the left, curled slightly at the edges from the sun. Only one item remained near the edge where the calf had emerged. A single loop of rope, dirt-caked and dried, part of the second harness. It had fallen from Tomas's hands during the lift and hadn't been retrieved. Elias bent down slowly. The loop was stiff in places, flexible in others. The dust clung to the outer braid. His fingers brushed it clean, only lightly. Then he placed it back where it had been. Not as a marker, just as something that didn't need to be taken. He looked once at the basin. The slope that had taken so long to cross now looked shallow. The clay, cracked in the heat, showed faint scratches where hooves had tried to grip and failed. A smear of darker earth showed the last pull, where the calf's side had dragged over the ridge. Wind would cover it soon. By morning, most of it would be gone. There was no sound behind him, no calls, no signal from the trees. The bush had swallowed the pair without pause, and that was right. If the calf had faltered, the herd would know what to do. If she had fallen, she would not have been alone. What mattered was that she had stood and walked, and they had not stopped her. Some rescues end in return. Others leave behind rope, clay, silence. Elias didn't need to write it down. There would be no photo, no report passed around. It had been too quiet for that. The kind of story that ends where it's supposed to, not in a headline or a farewell, just in the rustle of grass folding back into place. He turned and walked slowly away from the edge. Behind him, the clay marks still shone faintly in the slant of the evening light. Ahead, the wind moved low through the scrub, lifting thin dust into the golden air. And between both, the path of rescue disappeared as it should. Quiet, steady, left to the land.